Amy, good to see you again after New Guinea. Well, we brought some tea samples back with us and we thought we'd have a taste of those and see what we're actually looking for when we're analysing and tasting tea. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, first of all I'll show you how to taste. Dip your spoon in, give it a big slurp. Roll it around your mouth and spit out. Do you remember doing that in New Guinea? What we're actually looking for when we're analysing the tea samples are a number of characteristics. We're looking for visual characteristics, and I guess that's one of the things that's probably more important in tea than it is in coffee. Mouthfeel, and then the types of flavour. So we'll go through all of those. So if we have a look at the first tea, we've added milk to the first two, and that's really to bring the visual characteristics alive. So if you have a look at the first one, you'll note the deep red colour. And do you remember visiting Avyamp estate in New Guinea? And that's one of the characteristics of that particular estate. So if you look at the bowl and the liquid in the bowl, you get that deep red colour. And that will become really, really important when we're blending with other teas, and that's what that's going to offer. If you have a look at the second tea, which was from Kindang Tea Estate, if you remember going there, that we're looking at the brightness. So the visual meniscus of the bowl and the way the tea gleams out of the bowl. And it's always good to look at with milk. As we talked about in New Guinea also, one of the key differences between how we taste tea and how we taste coffee is that generally you'll taste coffee black without milk. Tea we taste a lot closer to how the consumer is going to drink it. And most consumers are going to drink this sort of tea with milk. So often we'll have a look with milk. Especially in New Zealand, you're right. So we're looking at the visual, the brightness of the tea. So brightness and the colour are the two key visual aspects that we're looking for. We can have a taste of this one as well. Might bring back some memories of Kindang Estate. It's also got a slight smoky taste, that, hasn't it? The next characteristics we're looking for are mouthfeel, and that's quite similar to coffee, I think. We're looking at the body, the thickness of the liquor, whether it's thin like water or thick like treacle. Most blends of tea are going to be somewhere in the middle, but we're using lots of different teas to try and achieve that. So that's the first thing to think about. The second mouthfeel characteristic to look for is astringency, and that's like whether it's soft like a marshmallow in your mouth, or whether it's really, really astringent and tightens up all the taste buds in your mouth. I was once told it's a bit like licking a pencil sharpener, but I guess that's a bit dangerous. So have a taste of this. This is one of the thickest teas we saw in New Guinea from Kujip. And hopefully you'll get a feel for how it fills your mouth, and it's got really, really good body. Really good tea to blend with that. The second one of those two will be much more astringent. This is from Minjijina, which was the highest estate in New Guinea. After you've spat that out, you'll see it really tightens up your taste buds and draws your mouth together. That's a sort of tea you need to blend with something else to mellow it down. So you can see even from the New Guinea estates that we saw, they've each got different characteristics. And you blend them all together and you end up with a great product. Finally, what we're looking for, just like coffee, is flavour profile. So there's two aspects of that, the type of flavour, but also the amount of flavour. So they're the two sort of measurements we're looking for. Now, New Guinea tea, as you know, has got a sort of earthy, slightly bakey characteristic, almost biscuity. So that's the type of flavour that we're analysing. But we also want to see whether the growth is giving the amount that we're looking for as well, or whether it's just fading into the background. Because if it's got an attractive flavour, we want that to come through in the blend. So this is one of the best that we tasted for that in New Guinea. You get that slight bakey and biscuity note. And also one of the other characteristics of a really, really good tea is that the flavour should be staying in your mouth and with you, even after you've swallowed it, if you're a customer, or spat it out if you're a taster like us.
So do you think tea's making a comeback in the cafe scene?
I think it is. I think for many years in New Zealand it's lagged behind coffee. Coffee is brilliant in New Zealand. The quality of the coffee, the quality of the baristas, in my view, is second to none in the world, and tea has lagged far behind that. One of the reasons is when you go and have a cup of coffee in a cafe in New Zealand, you're having an experience you can't do at home. And one of the issues with tea has often been you make a better cup of tea at home than you get in a cafe. So if we follow some of the steps that we've talked about, if the baristas follow some of the steps that we talk about, then we've got the hope that we're going to have tea baristas as well as coffee baristas. And people will be able to elevate the status of a cup of tea and get an experience through the different types of tea that we've talked about, the way that we've made the teas, and have an inspirational tea experience that will be equal to the cup of coffee that they had. And I would love people to be able to go and order a cup of tea in a cafe and to feel just as proud as ordering a flat white in New Zealand. So you've got an idea, even from the estates that we visited in New Guinea, they've all got really good characteristics. And one of the really important things is when we're making a blend of tea, just like in the world of coffee, that we try and bring out all the great characteristics of these teas and create something that is greater than the sum of the individual parts. That's the skill of blending.
Do you think that you could show me how to make the perfect cup of tea?
I'll do my best. Let's give it a go.
Okay.
To make a great cup of tea, there's a number of elements that you need, particularly in a cafe environment. But it's pretty simple. And if you follow all of these, then you're going to make a great cup of tea every time. The first thing I would say is the tea itself. You need to have good quality tea. Now that can be leaf tea, as we're going to use today, or tea bags. Generally, either are good quality. The second thing is use enough tea. One of the biggest reasons for serving a poor cup of tea, particularly in a cafe, is that you don't use enough tea. And for cafe owners, this is a high margin product, so you can afford to use a bit more tea. The last thing you probably want is your customers coming back and saying, that's too weak, can I have a bit more? Or can I have another tea bag, as I often do when I go to a cafe. So, for a teapot of this size, and we're going to use really good quality leaf tea here, I'm going to put, not the sort of regular 2 scoops, I'm going to put 3 scoops in. Okay? So, the quality of the tea is the most important thing. Secondly, maybe you could get the water actually.
Is it boiled?
Freshly boiled water, freshly drawn water and freshly boiled water. Now I understand that cafes won't often use kettles, they'll be using water from the machine probably, but the temperature of the water is very important. Unlike coffee, where the temperature can be down at 95 to 98 degrees, for tea and for black tea that we're making here, and we'll talk a little bit about the different types of tea in a minute, as close to boiling as possible, and that is what is going to release the flavour. So freshly drawn water and as close to a rolling boil as possible. While I'm pouring this, one of the other things I would say also is we're using one of our favourite teapots here, but the quality of the teapot is also very important, and I would advise anybody who's working in a cafe, and I do this myself, to practice pouring from the teapot, because I would say half the teapots that you can buy drip. And that's the other last thing you want, particularly if you're serving a customer or allowing the customer to serve themselves, is for water or tea to be dripping all over the place. So that's quite an important thing. Right, we need to let that brew now, and that's the third most important aspect of making a great cup of tea, and probably the single most important reason why you could get a bad cup of tea is not allowing the tea to brew for the right length of time. And again, this is where tea is very different to coffee. Coffee extraction times are very short. Tea, you need to allow time for the leaves to infuse. It takes a lot longer for all of the flavour and the antioxidants from the tea to develop. So for black tea that we're making here, at least 3 minutes. We have a saying, great tea takes 3, and we mean to make a great cup of tea you need to brew for 3 minutes, up to about 5 minutes. When we're tasting, as you know, we'll brew for 6 minutes, and that's the sort of maximum time to get all of the flavour out of the tea. But the most common reason for having a poor cup of tea is that the tea is only brewed for 30 seconds or under 2 minutes. The first 30 seconds, you tend to get all of the caffeine out, only a little bit of the flavour. So allowing enough time is really, really, really important. So while we're allowing that to brew, we could probably have a little bit of a chat about the different types of tea.
Okay.
So we're going to have a chat about, while the tea's brewing, the different types of tea that you can buy and that you might serve in your cafe. There are a number of different types of tea. There's white tea, green tea, oolong tea and black tea. And the one thing that binds them all together is time in the process to make them. So they're all part of the same plant. We're also going to have a look at fruit and herb infusions as well, which are not tea at all. They're something else entirely. So let's have a look at those. White tea tends to be the newest shoots from the top of the bush. The home of white tea is in Fujian province in China, so that is where the best and most expensive white tea comes from. Very, very delicate, very, very expensive, and only takes a smaller amount of time to brew, so maybe 1 to 2 minutes. Lower in caffeine, high in antioxidants. We've got a good example of a green tea here from Japan, in fact. And green tea is unoxidized black tea, so the leaves are steamed not long after plucking. This is quite a delicate tea, so if you're serving green tea in a cafe environment, again, 2 to 3 minutes, no longer than that. Doesn't need quite as long. And also the temperature can be a bit lower. So, for instance, if you're getting quite sophisticated in how you serve tea in a cafe environment, you can make a green tea before you make the black teas because it can cool down more quickly. Very, very good for you. There are also a number of different types of black teas on the market. So if you want to have a range of teas in the cafe, there's lots and lots of different styles. This is a typical English breakfast style, so slightly smaller, more spherical leaf, and that's designed to brew more quickly. So something like Twining's English breakfast, for instance, it will be really strong, brew more quickly, infuse with colour. So look for sort of rounder leaves that will give you that, but you still need to brew it for 3 to 5 minutes. This tea here is from Sri Lanka and is what we call an orthodox manufactured tea. Very lovely, wiry, attractive leaf. Some of the best cafes I've seen in the world will actually serve the leaf alongside the teapot so you can actually see what you're drinking. These will take a little bit longer to unfold, the leaves. So you need 3 to 5 minute brew and you can watch them unfolding in the teapot. That will give a slightly lighter, more refined cup, but really, really good flavour from the leaves. Also, I think if you're having a range of tea in a cafe, there's lots and lots and lots of flavoured teas that you can choose from, both green, fruit and herb infusions, but also black teas. Two of the most popular would be lemon scented or Earl Grey type teas. Earl Grey being generally a China tea that's flavoured with bergamot. Brew in the normal way and then give the customer the option of having milk or not. That's one of the other important things to say. Green teas and white teas you would never serve with milk. Most black teas you would serve with milk, at least giving the customer the option. Chai teas are becoming more and more popular. Spicy teas, in this case from India, so reminiscent of how the Indians drink their tea in India, full of cloves and cinnamon and spicy tastes. So I think if you're going to have a range of teas in your cafe, English breakfast style, a couple of green teas, some flavoured teas, and then increasingly popular are fruit and herb infusions. We've got one here that we call Island Paradise. It's got pineapple and papaya and red currants. One of the interesting things that maybe most people don't realise is that all tea that comes from Camellia sinensis plant, which includes black tea and green tea, all contain a small amount of caffeine. And when you're drinking it, probably about half the amount of caffeine as in an espresso or a cup of coffee. Fruit and herb infusions are not tea at all. They are from the fruit pieces and flavours from the fruits themselves, and they are caffeine free. What that also means is that when you're brewing fruit and herb infusions, 3 to 5 minutes is ideal, but it doesn't matter if you let the leaves brew for longer than that. They won't stew in the way that tea does. And so brew in the same way as tea, but know that you're going to be drinking something that doesn't have caffeine. Probably ready to taste some tea now. We'll drink our pot of tea.
So if I had a request, I'd like my tea strong or I like my tea weak, how would you go about remedying that? Or is there a way? Do you just take potluck and you get what you're given?
It's a really good question, and I hope you don't take potluck, actually. That's what you shouldn't take. You should ask for what you want. I think if you want strong tea, then ask for an English breakfast style tea or a strong black tea, and a good tea menu ought to be able to guide you towards that. And then make sure you brew probably for the upper length of that time, say 5 minutes, whether it's the barista doing that Or get the customer to do that and provide the customer with a timer so they themselves can do it. So brew for that length of time with strong tea and provide milk with that, and that's going to get you a strong cup of tea. One of the most common mistakes that baristas might make and consumers themselves make is that if they want a weaker tea, and they say they like weak tea, they don't want too much caffeine or too much tannin, then still brew or allow your customer to brew for 3 to 5 minutes and then provide them with some water and dilute the tea, and then they can dilute it to taste, but then you can drink the cup of tea in the knowledge that you've got all of the flavour and all of the antioxidants, and you won't get that if you only brew the tea for 30 seconds. Shall we try our perfect cup of tea?
Oh, that is a good cup of tea.
I'm glad you like it.
So what happens if it's not just a 2-person pour? What if I've got someone who wants a cup of tea for 4 people? What's the equation?
Well, firstly, if you've got 4 people, I'd be very happy for a start. But the thing is, I think the best way to serve tea is either in a 2-person pot. So you do 2 of those if you've got 4 people. If you've got 4 people wanting 4 different teas, then I would give them 4 different pots of tea. Use the same amount of tea, or make sure that you're following the instructions for the type of tea that you're using, and then get the water in at the same time and brew them all for the same length of time. That's the easiest way to do it, and that will ensure that all of the pots and therefore all of the customers have had their tea brewed for the same amount of time and they've got the right amount of tea.
I really like this cup. What would you recommend in a cafe setting?
Well, I love this cup too. It's double-walled glass. It's robust. It's not going to break easily. And also the great thing about this is that it shows the liquid coming to life. So I love this. However, I think the most important thing is to brew your tea properly. There's no problem in using mugs or fine bone china with saucers. It really doesn't matter. You should choose the cups that suit the environment of your cafe and suit the identity of your brand. The key is to make sure that they're clean and not chipped. All the things you do with coffee cups, just exactly the same. The milk's also important too, just as important with tea as it is with coffee. I guess with coffee, generally cafes will have blue top and probably trim. I think overall the ideal milk to serve tea, if you were just going to choose one, would be light blue here in New Zealand. But I think as with anything, listen to what your consumer is saying, your customer is saying, and have them all available just in case. For instance, a big strong tea like English breakfast will go well with blue top or light blue, so fuller fat milks. A more delicate refined tea such as Earl Grey or a light Ceylon tea go better with light blue or trim milks. There are also teas that will go well with other non-dairy milks like soy milk. For instance, the chai tea that we talked about earlier goes really, really well with soy milk because the texture of the soy milk really brings out the spices and adds a really nice body and sweetness to the flavour.